Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to reflect on the last week of British politics, particularly concerning national crises, and wonder if there are simply too many for the general public to keep track of. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So let's just go back to just before the pandemic in the UK. Boris Johnson had pulled us out of the EU and demolished the Brexit department. He did that even though it was about to become really important that we had a coordinated response because we had to negotiate our final exit from the transition period. But he wanted to stop people using the word Brexit, thinking about Brexit. He wanted to stop people thinking that Brexit was an ongoing process. He was determined that people should not be allowed to think that any of the problems coming in 2021, when we left the transition period, would be down to Brexit. Now he loves talking about it. He loves talking about Brexit. He uses the term all the time. Not only is the word allowed again, but he even has a Brexit department again, renewed under the leadership of unelected Minister David Frost. So what changed? Well, the COVID pandemic, of course. It effectively prepared us for living in a perpetual state of crisis, as well as giving people a ready excuse for the impacts of Brexit. Imagine if the pandemic had not arrived when it did. Imagine what the shortage of food and petrol would do to the public's view of Brexit then. What would they be able to blame it on? Imagine what pressure the government would be under to deal with it. And there could be no excuses made. They would try. They would still talk about global pressures. But then people would be able to say, but this only happened this year. This only happened this year. It's not happening in other countries. Why not? But look at where we are now. A week ago, the national crisis, the latest one, was soaring energy bills and a subsequent shortage of carbon dioxide. That CO2 shortage means major problems for the supply of meat. Okay, people didn't see that last week. They're not going to see that for a little while, but it's going to have that impact as well. Problems to the wider food supply chain as well. It's not just about meat. And now it's barely been reported on. You can't see any updates on it. Why? Is it abating or something as this crisis passed us by? No, it's still there. It's still a serious crisis. It's still a critical problem. The longer it goes on, the more serious the consequences will be. And it is still going on. This is a serious crisis. A serious crisis like this would be front page news every day for as long as the crisis lasts under normal circumstances. But then what happened late last week? We had a petrol crisis. And this seems to be the problem. The front page of the newspaper's only got room for one crisis at a time. I mean, okay, if Ant and Dec are going through a bad patch, maybe they stick them in the corner somewhere as well. Actually, little aside on that. So my partner was musing on the fact that owners of electrical hybrid cars must be feeling pretty good now. On the local community group here, some people were even offering to help out if you couldn't get to work for certain things. Because we've got to accept at the moment we've got a serious problem. We've got nurses, teachers, doctors and so on can't get to work because they can't get fuel for their car. And then you think to yourself, so imagine if electric cars weren't a thing at all. The crisis would be even worse. Not that electric car owners completely get off because the raging energy prices means that the cost of running that car is higher, but it's still lower than paying fuel costs and they don't have to queue up for ages to get refueled. So as long as energy supply holds, should be fine. Unfortunately, a government minister last week promised that the lights would not be going out. As soon as they said that, I thought, no. So now I'm worried that even if the energy crisis can get worse, I'm thinking to myself, that means the lights are going to go out. Because whenever a member of Boris Johnson's government has promised that a bad situation won't get worse, well, should we just say their track record ain't great? And you can see the impact of all these crises layered on top of each other in the headlines of the Sunday papers the other day. Some focused on the shortage of lorry drivers, some on the energy crisis, some on the imminent cut to universal credit. And do you know what's incredible? Look at this graph of infection rates for school-age kids in England. That's not being reported on at all as far as I can tell in the mainstream media. Crisis on top of crisis on top of crisis. And I was saying on Twitter at the weekend, it seemed to resonate with quite a lot of people, that I miss the days when we were a normal country and we had a crisis now and then, and the newspapers would have easy headlines for a week or two, and the government would be under pressure to sort it, and then something would be done, it would go away, and we'd have relative peace until the next crisis, which might not be for half a year or so. Now I've got them all the time. The surge in infection rates in schools is a national crisis. The food shortages, a national crisis. The out-of-control energy prices, a national crisis. The shortages of medical supplies like blood test tubes, national crisis. The fact that people are struggling to get fuel for their cars and that this is set to get worse before it gets better, national crisis. And that is not counting the crises that the government are storing up for the foreseeable future, the ones that are on their way but people aren't noticing just yet. The cuts to universal credit continuing to threats to spark a trade war with the EU. Each of these on its own would be splashed all over the front pages of the news if there were no other crises vying for attention. But there are too many. And it makes me wonder if this isn't a problem, not just in terms of one crisis knocking another off the front page, but just in normalising a state of emergency for everyone. It's like the pandemic has prepared us for accepting chaos in our lives without the capacity for many to see which is chaos that is just can't be helped and which is a deliberate policy of the government. And because the media aren't pointing out that these crises are not being inflicted on neighbouring countries, people just accept it as a consequence of these turbulent times. Unprecedented times we have. Yeah, because it's unprecedented that we'd put a government in charge that would want to cause such damage to the country. And I still hold out hope that there has to come a point where the public get tired of the chaos. That they say, okay, this is going on for too long. The government really should be doing something. That they decide the government needs to actually solve problems, not just moan about how it's someone else's fault. Nothing the government is doing now will deal with the lorry driver shortage, for example. You know, what have they done about that? There are two things. They've written letters to apparently 1 million qualified HGV drivers in the country. Oh, please come and work for us. They left the profession for a reason. Those reasons haven't gone away. They're not going to suddenly come back to knacker their work-life balance, to knacker their health for a pittance of a pay, even though in some places it's gone up quite a bit. For just because the Transport Secretary says, oh, please, we've made a mess of it, but we don't want to admit it. What's the second thing they've done? They've invited foreign lorry drivers to come back, but don't you dare be here. We want you here right up until and including Christmas Eve. We do not want you here the next day. So that means we expect you to work yourself like a dog on Christmas Eve and then bugger off. Bugger off out of the country on Christmas Day. Before Christmas, actually on the stroke of midnight, off you go. And this is leading to a whole domino effect of consequences, shortage of lorry drivers. But when's this time going to come when people get sick of it? If the Conservatives can win another general election before the public come to that realisation, then they don't have to care for another few years. You know, because all the government are doing right now is spending their meagre efforts on blaming others. You know, there was the front page of the Mail on Sunday, where they were blaming an HGV boss for the fuel panic. What? There's no fixing of the problem. And if there's no fix to the problem, guess what? The problem remains in place. In fact, it can get worse. Because if there's one thing this cavalcade of crises has shown us, if we didn't know before, is that if you keep a crisis in place, the next one that comes along can make it even worse. There's a cumulative effect. You know, the domino effect is a bugger. Brexit gave us a shortage of lorry drivers, so we couldn't distribute food around the country easily. So storage couldn't shift stocks to bring in the stock needed for winter, which means Christmas is hampered, even if we solved all the problems now. You know, that means Christmas shortages that cannot now be stopped. But that same lorry driver shortage now means we can't get enough fuel to the pump. Well, remember the panic was sparked not by an HGV boss saying anything, but because petrol stations actually closed due to having no fuel. And then the Sun newspaper posted a front page saying that the country was running empty. Which wasn't actually true. I said at the time, that was exaggeration. But sure, blame someone in the haulage industry that has tried to warn about the impacts of Brexit. So then look at what you have. You have a shortage of drivers, so the cost of transport goes up. Higher wages needed to attract the not enough drivers. Then you have shortages of fuel as well. Well, guess what lorries need? Fuel. How is that going to affect haulage now? Shortage of drivers, higher fuel costs, increased costs for transport. Has to be passed on to the consumer. Increased food prices. Increased food prices, higher inflation. Need to pay people more to be able to keep up. If you don't deal with a crisis, pretty soon it combines with the next crisis to make things orders of magnitude worse. Look at the situation we're in now. Realise that the consequences are set to get worse. This is from the people in the supply chain who know what's going on and warned us all about this some time ago. In fact, in my next video, I'm even going to say how the civil service warned the government a few years ago. And then we look ahead to the next few months. We still have a shortage of lorry drivers and other key workers. We still have rising energy and fuel bills. The petrol crisis may abate in a couple of weeks, but the root cause is still there. You know, we'll also have the universal credit cut, which may be insane enough to we may be insane enough to suspend the Northern Ireland Protocol, and then the EU could be serious about putting tariffs on UK goods. I talked recently about how they're quite cunning about the way they target these for maximum political advantage. We may also get an unsustainable winter demand on the NHS. I say may, behave yourself, Phil. And just think about how all of these issues will again combine to make each individual crisis much worse than if it existed in isolation. I guess we'll find out soon enough. Can't wait to see which new crisis hits this week. I'm thinking to myself, blimey, I'm going to be on about the petrol and energy crisis all week, aren't I? And then I'll be thinking, but that's not taking into account the crisis that's going to hit us this week that I don't even know about. But until then, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.